Welcome to Secrets of Near-Field Monitoring for AES 2020. My name is Mike Rodriguez, and I'm the host of the Audio Nowcast Pro Audio Podcast, and I'll be moderating this discussion with Mr. Carl Tatz. And today we're going to learn some secrets of near-field monitoring. So Carl, why don't you just take it away?
I will do that. Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone taking the time to view this presentation. First off, just to get going here, I'd like to quickly explain what we'll be talking about. Along with our studio designs across the country, we install our Phantom Focus monitoring system in each one. The hardware includes a digital processor, 2 subwoofers, speaker stands, and the monitors of your choice. It's a 2-day on-site laser-assisted installation procedure and renders a powerful monitoring tool for your audio, or for you, the audio professional. That said, we will be touching on that a little bit during the presentation, but more importantly, we'll be sharing some of the protocols and discoveries from the Phantom Focus playbook that if you take the time to implement, you'll find them very valuable, providing a giant step up for your monitoring. And at the end of the talk, you will also have a better understanding of what's happening right now in your room. Okay, this is the Null positioning ensemble. This is the first thing I want to share with you. This is available on Carl Tatz Design website in the library section under acoustic tools. You can just print this out. This is incredibly valuable. It's what we do in the Phantom Focus system, and it's very simple. It's almost dumb, and someone can take a look at it and just say, well, yeah, I kind of do that, but you're probably not. I'll just go, it really requires no explanation, so I'll proceed to explain what it is.
Yeah, it looks pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the green line is the console. We use a 30-60 triangle, 67.5 inches from tweeter to tweeter. There's no magic in 67.5 inches, you know, can I use 68 or 69 or something? Yes, you can. But I wouldn't get it much narrower than that. We stick with 67.5 because we like it, it works, and mainly it's consistent on all the systems across the country to give a very similar experience to the listener. Okay, so you can see that triangle. The key here is to get the apex of that triangle in front of the console 18 inches, okay? So you actually have like a mini triangle there, and that's where your head is. Your head ends up being about 6 inches from the front of the console. Obviously, you're not going to be in a vise. You're going to move around like anyone would, but that's a general concept. That's where, you know, we actually measure the monitors from there. But it's a great listening position. You want the tweeters to be at ear height. If they're high, you need to tilt them down. Some speaker manufacturers will say that the dispersion on their tweeters is easily capable of dealing with that, but it's just not the same as having them at ear height. It's very obvious. You probably noticed that yourself. If you're in a situation where the speakers are on a meter bridge and the tweeter shooting over your head, when you raise up out of the seat and get at ear level, you can see it's a completely different story. So whatever it takes, go ahead.
I've mixed at studios like that, where you sit at the console and the meter bridge is high, and then they're not even angled down; they're just firing above your head.
Yeah.
And you
eventually
you have to stand up.
Right, and eventually you would learn to do that. You know, you can learn to mix in an empty swimming pool, but ideally, you'd rather not go to those lengths. So make sure the tweeters are at ear height. Get your angles and. Let's see, I think pretty much everything is clear here. What you're going to experience is you're going to experience the monitors disappearing. It'll seem like you're listening to the music and not the monitors. As soon as you step outside of that apex, then it'll be apparent that you're listening to the speakers. So that's a little bit of the magic that happens when you do this. So
That's brilliant.
I get some photographs. My assistant doing this and can show you how you do this. Hopefully this will help.
What's great about that previous graph is it literally shows you where you need to place your monitors.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And yeah, what I tell people to do is don't kind of do it exactly, because that's where the magic is. So you can see, you take a strip of tape, console tape, or what have you, and run it across the front of the monitors like that, and get yourself a 60-30 degree triangle. You can get it at Office Depot. We use these metal ones that we get at the architectural places. But that's a general idea. Let me show, I got a couple more pictures that'll show you even more clearly what we're talking about.
You know, it makes you wonder if you go to those music stores where they have the wall of monitors that you're supposed to audition. And they're all different heights, and they're all, you know, different widths. That to me is like, okay, I bet you the one in the right position is going to sound the best.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to do. Okay, let's see. All right. So you can see in this picture how he's holding the triangle with the tape. And I've got an even better picture where I can show you. So here's a close-up of the triangle. You can see there's a little gap between the tape and the triangle. You shoot for like 1/16 to 1/8 inch, no more than that. And that's how you'll have your angle. Now, that said, you're not going to do this in 20 minutes. It's tedious, I promise you. It takes us an entire day. We use a laser quad system, but you can get it using a tape measure. Make sure your speakers are the same distance from the front wall, you know, obvious things. And it's a seesaw thing. When you change the angle on one side, that's going to change the distance. You're going to lose your 67.5 inches. So you're going to be seesawing between the 67.5 inches and the 30 degrees there. But eventually, you know, it might take an hour or so to get it exactly right. You know, get your height right and get that. But I can promise you it will be dramatic as far as your imaging is concerned.
I guess if you're building a studio too, you could do that all in CAD, you know, your CAD program, and figure out how far you have to be off the wall and everything, and then double check it with all the tools.
Well, we'll get something even better than that, and that's the next slide. And this is a axle mode room calculator. So let me show you this. This is also on the website, Carl Tatz Design Library Acoustic Tools. This is an example. There is an active version of this that you can download, and you just put the measurements of your room in here, height, width, and length. These are based on rectangular rooms, so you might have to do a little fudging if it's not a shoebox, is what we call it. But that's what this is based on. If if you have a room with splayed walls, you can still kind of use the length mode, but it won't quite be as dead on as this can be.
This is brilliant. This is brilliant.
Well, I love this calculator because it's so simple and it's very visual. There's tons of these out there on the internet, but this is the best one I've ever seen from one-on-one technical products. So let's just talk about the bottom here. We've got the length mode on the bottom, the width mode in the middle, and the top is the height modes. And people, I assume people know what modes are. If you have a room, you have modes, and it's the way the low frequencies react to the boundaries based on the speed of sound. So what you want to do, these nulls here, that's definitely where you don't want to be. You want to be in between them. It'll give you more of a balance of the frequencies and the boosts. So typically, most rooms you're going to end up in this area here. Sometimes you might end up in this area. It depends on the size of your room, the smaller the room. If you have a smaller room, you might end up here, which is fine. But typically you'll end up here. And your speakers, again, you're going to be somewhat limited by the size of your room, but you'll probably be inside that first null. And even worst case scenario, even if it is in the null a bit, that's the fourth axle null, which is not as critical as the first, second, and third, which are a lot deeper, but it depends. But if you had to make a trade-off between the two, well, I can get the speakers in the right place, but I can't get the listening position in the right place. Go to the listening position is more important. And you can see you can look at this example. It's self-explanatory. Also, we just figured out between 56 inches and 83 inches is about 72 inches, give or take. And that's where you want to, that's your tool for your null positioning ensemble. The distance between the listening ears, which is 6 inches in front of the console, to the face of the baffle of the speaker is 45 inches. You'll only need that when you're doing this, but it's called a null positioning ensemble for a reason. It's ensemble of the speakers, the console, and the listener, and they move back and forth ensemble. So just think of it as one thing, and you just want to get it placed there as well as you can.
And the inches refer to the distance from the wall, right? That's 24 inches from
Correct.
Front wall, correct. 72 inches from the front wall.
Yeah, front wall is indicated here. Yeah, front wall.
Gotcha. Here. That's amazing. That tells you just enter in your room information and you know exactly where to go. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I love this thing. And then let's go to the height mode here. If you have an 8-foot ceiling, you're going to be obviously in the worst place you can be, which is the middle of the room, middle of the height of the room. So the only thing you can do in that case is, this is a great argument to use, get a cloud above the console in the listening position, and that will attenuate that dip, the double dip there, the first and third axle null there. This happens to be a 9-foot room, so you're in pretty good shape. You're outside of that dip. Now, the width mode, you look at this picture, and the most important thing in a control room is symmetry. So you want to be in the middle of the room. And the reason for symmetry is, you want the left speaker and the right speaker to see the same thing. If the left speakers, if there's asymmetry on one side, you're going to have a different frequency response from one speaker compared to the other side. Okay, but this still looks really bad because you have to be in the center. So I'll tell you something about the phantom focus system. We always use a pair of subwoofers, and we locate them in the front corners. When you do that, the subwoofers actually become out of phase with one another at the first and third axle null. So this double dip you see here just comes up automatically. Whoop, no EQ, nothing.
That's cool. That's pretty awesome.
Okay, but if you don't have that situation, what happens is the left speaker low end will react to the left corner, the right speaker low end will react to the right corner, and you will have some of that attenuation. It's not as dramatic, but it makes it a lot more usable. Otherwise, people would have had much bigger problems over the years. Do this, get your general idea where you are, and then go to your null positioning ensemble, get that set up. And once you've got it, you want to experiment, because there's no way, these these calculations are based on concrete bunkers, which nobody has, which is a very good thing. Actually, drywall, on the stud wall is the biggest bass trap you're going to have. So it's really to your advantage. But still, there's going to be a pocket. So what I suggest is, once you get your null positioning ensemble set up, put some tape marks on the floor on each side of your stand with some Sharpie marks, excuse me, and that way you'll have a track so you can move the speaker forward 3 inches, 6 inches, back, just try some different positions. And the reason I want you to put the tape on the floor is so that you don't have to start from scratch, because you just put a bunch of time into getting the null positioning ensemble set up. So when you move it, just do it as carefully as you can and listen. And you might say, whoa, you just find a pocket and it's just great. Or you might be fine where you started. And wherever you move, you're going to lose your 67.5 inch. You're going to lose your angle a little bit, but it's not like starting from scratch. So you'll have to tweak it at that point. But if you do these two things, the imaging of your monitors is going to be better than you've ever imagined. And also your frequency response will be helped by avoiding these nulls.
That's great, because it just gives you a really good starting point when you're putting your studio together. Like, even before you start putting up all your
Right.
sound treatment, you have to position the monitor, and I mean, it
Right.
tells you exactly where.
Yeah, that's a good point. So obviously you have to have treatment. So I'll just talk about that very quickly. We can talk at great length about every one of these subjects. But you want to get the first reflections taken care of. So in other words, if you're sitting in the listening position, you want to have someone hold a mirror on the wall. Many of you probably know about this trick. You have someone run a mirror across the side wall, and wherever you see the speakers, that's where you want to put your absorption. My general philosophy for control room treatment is to have the back totally dead, the ceiling dead, put some corner traps in the four corners, and then you're catching your first reflections. Obviously, your first reflections are your cloud also. You just don't want anything to come back from you. If you clap your hands, you don't want to hear the room, because anything that comes back from the room is going to mix with the direct sound from the speakers, and then you're going to have comb filtering. And like you have no treatment at all, you've experienced, the speakers, even though if they're at arm's length, they sound far away. So that's my general, just take the craziness out of the room. Take the ambience out of the room. This isn't a tracking room. This is a control room. Don't be afraid to err on the dead side, and don't get too excited about diffusion, because it's not a big, in my opinion, it's not a big factor, positive factor. I will say that to each side of your listening position, and depending how small your room is, how narrow it is, it's good to have a little bit of reflection diffusion on that side, not totally dead. If it's far enough away, it doesn't matter. Okay. All right. Moving right along. Let's see what else we can do. We're trying to keep this within a certain time period, so I apologize.
This is fantastic. I'm learning a lot.
Good. By the way, if anyone has any questions, you can find my contact information on carltatzdesign.com or phantomfocus.com, and you can get to the site from either site. Just a click away. There's a ton of information there. And if you want to just contact me, just drop me an email, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Okay, so let's talk about what happens in a control room. This is a big piece that no one talks about.
Magic happens.
This is totally magic. Totally magic.
That's what all happens.
Okay. So let me get, what you're looking at is a frequency response of left and right speaker, right being blue, left being orange. Not that it matters in this case.
Wow.
This was actually at well, I probably shouldn't mention where it is. But it's at a studio that we mentioned, we won the Tech Award for. And this is a pair of, let's see, what were they? Barefoot Micromain 27s. So you can see from like 1K out, it's incredibly smooth.
Right.
It's really that smooth, but I'm going to take credit for it since I designed the room. It's not always that smooth, but it just worked out real well in this room. But you can see this problem here, this huge dip. For one thing, there's an asymmetricality because the room wasn't symmetrical. This was a showroom, okay? It was Vintage King in Nashville. There, now I've said it. And it's a showroom. It's not a dedicated mix room per se. So there were double doors in the back on one side. So that's what happens when you lose symmetry. The low end changes. The upper frequencies don't, but the low end will change. So you
that's pretty drastic.
Yeah, it's pretty drastic. And then there's a big hump here, et cetera, going out. But the point I want to make here is this dip that you see at approximately 125 hertz. This is something that happens in every room with every monitors. It doesn't matter what room it is. It doesn't matter what monitors they are. They're all going to do this, more or less. Might be 15 dB like this, or it could be 10 dB, but it will always happen. If you think this isn't happening in your room, you're mistaken. In my lectures, I I show graphs like this of like 22 different rooms with different monitors, and sometimes the same monitor in different rooms, and they all show something, along these lines. So what is that? What happens with that? This is the main reason why everybody has a problem with the low end, why the low end is difficult, why you have to kind of learn your monitors and figure the whole thing out. Because if you boosted the frequency here to get the bass to sound the way you wanted to, you take it out to the car and it would be, way too much. I'm sure everyone's had that experience. So you come back in, you say, oh, that sounds great, I better turn it down. So you have to ration yourself audio-wise, part of learning your speakers, quote unquote. And then obviously you have a big hump here. Just in full disclosure, when you have a hump at 60 hertz or a lower hump, you're going to hear the overtones of that here, or chances are you're going to hear them up here where the hole is. But it's still not the same as filling this in. So we noticed this for years, and no one ever talked about it. The speaker manufacturers don't want to, talk about this much. And if you have an auto-tune type of setup, it's very, you can't EQ that much. You can't EQ 10 dB without blowing your speakers, unless you want to listen to 30 dB. So there's no real solution for this. Well, there is a solution. I'm going to tell you about it. But finally, someone from JL Audio, a friend of mine, sent me a article from the Cambridge Music Audiophile. I can't remember the name of the paper. I'm sorry. Every time I do one of these, I tell myself I'm going to call it up. But in it, I actually got mentioned in the article because I had an article in Sound on Sound about what we're talking about. And there was a gentleman in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who made this discovery, Roy Allison, that when you put speakers on a stand, there's a floor bounce, there's a cancellation. The low frequency hits the floor and comes back up, and there's a cancellation. That's what you're looking at. Now, there are other boundary areas that can contribute to this also. It was primarily the floor. So all this time, and it's called the Allison Effect. And all this time, I thought it was the Tatz Effect. But it's the Allison Effect. So I was relieved to know that I wasn't making this up. So know that this is happening in your room. So let me show you, the only way you can fill this in is with subwoofers. So let me go to another picture here. Okay, you can see in this graph, we've added a subwoofer, and that's what the pink line is. But the subwoofer is, the room is king, and that's what's happening with the subwoofer setup. So you got to dip there. You can raise it up. This room had a particular issue at that frequency. Hopefully you won't. But that's the only way. In other words, you could raise the level of the subwoofer right now and fill it in, but then you're going to have problems at 63 hertz, and
sure,
it's not going to be a perfect solution. So you could move the subwoofer around, and without analyzing software, it's impossible to do. So you're still going to, ultimately, you're going to end up getting something that you're comfortable with and you like the sound of. I hate to say it. With the Phantom Focus system, we have the luxury of actually doing this completely correct. If you use an auto-tune setup, this will definitely help you. You can do it with subwoofers. There's several out there. Genelec comes to mind that probably does at least one of the best. Their take on monitoring is very good. They understand what's going on, but it's not quite what we do here. And let me show you.
What's scary about this graph, before you leave this graph, is obviously the bass, which looks completely out of control, but also look at that bump in 250 and then the dip between 500 and 1K. Yeah. I mean, those are really critical frequencies, especially 250. Like, that's just like snare drum. That's like your beef on your snare drum. You know what I mean? So, wow, that's just kind of scary.
Yeah. And And obviously your tendency is going to be to boost that and then to bring this down, if
Yeah.
this is what your monitors are doing. And again, you'll realize, oh, you take it someplace else and it's too loud. So then you gradually figure out what it is. And the general shape, which we're going to be talking about in the next slide, is the shape of the frequency response is very important. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so here's what happens in a phantom focus system. We have the ability to do something like this. You can see the subwoofer is still there, but it's aligned with the frequency response. It's totally smooth. And I was talking about the shape. Generally, it's about 6 dB hut on the low end compared to the high end. And that's the Fletcher-Munson curve, which your ear needs to hear more low end so it sounds as loud as the mid-range. If you tune something flat, it's going to sound bass shy. Most people don't talk about that. And this technology, I didn't invent any of this stuff. This technology has been around for a long time. So keep in mind, if you have an auto-tune thing, if you can raise it up in the low end somewhat, you'll have a more accurate system. Now, let me show you something else here.
That was incredible. And that's your phantom focus graph, right? Your phantom focus system?
Right, yeah, that's the tuned system. So take a look at this. Okay, so you can see the tuned system on the bottom. The top graph is the phase graph. And you can see from the crossover right here on down, and I could go at great lengths in explaining what we, more specifically what we do with the phantom focus system, but that's not what we're doing here today. So starting at the crossover, you can see that right here you're looking at the left, the right, and the subwoofer. They're perfectly in phase. So that when you listen to a phantom focus system, something tuned like this, the subwoofers are not localized. It never sounds like, well, let's shut the subwoofer off. What does it sound like with the subwoofer off? That never happens in a system like this. And the low end will sound like it's coming out of your 5-inch drivers. It'll sound like 20 hertz is coming out of your 5-inch drivers. You never realize that they're the subwoofers are over in the corner or wherever. And it's pretty dramatic. So that's the goal, and this is where we really roll up our sleeves to make this happen. So between the null positioning ensemble you can do right now, tonight, today, whatever, this is going to be a little bit out of your reach. But I think you can start to approximate it a bit with some of these auto-tune things, or just think about it. The main thing I'm showing you this is I just want you to be aware that this is happening. The reality is the greatest records in the world have not been mixed on phantom focus systems, although a lot of good ones have. So people learn it, talented people, you can do it. You can, a good analogy is you can drive across town on a skateboard, or you can drive across town in a Ferrari, your choice. One is probably going to be a better experience than the other, transportation-wise anyway.
But what's so great about those graphs is that it's a great starting point because you can see what's happening, but then you also have a goal. Like, you have an attainable goal that you want to reach with your studio and how it sounds. And you're showing like, okay, this is the way it should be. So, no matter what you use, you have the goal of going there. So you're not shooting in the dark, and you're not just relying on someone's opinion. It's like you have like some science there to actually like set these parameters that you can then hopefully keep tweaking to achieve the maximum. And that, I think that's really great, because I can't tell you, especially starting out, when you get a new pair of speakers and you're like, okay, we got to set them up, and you hear that, okay, you need to be equal distance and all that, but you never know why. You just like, that's what people said it is. And
Right.
To see the graphs, it's just amazing.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question, Michael. You have actually experienced the phantom focus system. Maybe you could talk about, since you've actually heard, you can see the graph, you've actually heard that. Do you want to share that?
Sure, absolutely. So prior to going to meeting Carl in the studio, Carl is actually a featured story on our web series Spaces when I went to Nashville. And we went to one of the studios that he designed, which was a fabulous room. So many really great, innovative things.
The upper deck. Yeah.
Upper Deck Studio, and he sat me down and he did a mini version of what you just heard. And I'm sitting there, and I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical. I was like, okay, I've been in this business a long time. I've heard tons of speakers. I've heard tons and tons and tons of monitors and all kinds of stuff. And I sat there and he started the demo, and let me tell you, it was just mind blowing. And I don't get blown away by audio things too often, but it really was mind blowing because the clarity and the depth and the fact that you really do lose your speakers. It's just coming from the front wall. It's just coming at you. And the imaging was amazing. Where everything was. And we were listening to commercial music. We were listening to, Michael Jackson and everything, Earth, Wind and Fire, all, some great stuff, some newer stuff too. And just to be able to hear it and to be able to hear the, every little detail, and it wasn't fatiguing. And to be honest, it was relatively loud, but not harsh, and it was fun. And I just wish I could just sit there and just play music over and over, because you're basically rediscovering music.
I think at one point I told you, I warned you, by the way, you're listening at 110 dB.
Yeah. And it wasn't fatiguing, because it was enjoyable. And it was pretty inspiring. It really, really was. Like, if I could sit
I remember
in
looking
front of
on your
that.
face. It was fun, and I've experienced that a lot. But again, this isn't just to blow your skirt up. It's a tool, because when it's right on that system, it travels. Which is obviously the whole idea. But again, getting back to the audience here, I don't want to turn this into a Phantom Focus commercial. Try the Null Positioning Ensemble. And check out those tools on the Carl Tatz Design in the library under Acoustic Tools, and try this at home, and let me know what you think. I get responses from all over the country, people who just do this simple thing, because it seems so simple that people, I guess that people just think, well, yeah, I kind of do that, but you don't you have to do it exactly. Once you do it, it's like, what it's like if you're mixing a vocal and all of a sudden you just knock it down a half a dB and boom, there's the pocket. That's what we're talking about here. So I think that's it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I've got a couple questions.
Okay.
I'll play audience for a little bit. So with this setup, and if we can get close to flattening that curve, how does it translate to kind of the new mixing spec, really, of like going down to portable devices? I mean, there are people that's how they consume their music, is just listening to it either directly from their iPad or their iPhone, or, earbuds like I do.
Yeah.
Have you talked to any of your engineer friends that are out there, and how it translates all the way down?
It has to. It's the same thing. Earbuds or laptops. It's the same thing, because you no longer have anything, frequencies masking other frequencies. So that's what allows you to play it louder than you normally would. And one of the most dramatic things that people point out to me is that you can turn it really low. I mean, as low as the pot on your console or your monitor controller will go, and you can listen and you'll hear every single thing in the low end. So what happens in a laptop or earbuds, obviously they only go so low.
Right.
Again, you're hearing the overtones, and you've done it correctly. If a record is mixed correctly, even though you don't hear that low end, you'll hear the overtones of the low end, and the octaves comes up. So, yeah, I mean, it works. It really doesn't matter what it's playing on.
That's good, because, I mean, that's where I struggle sometimes, is you get something that sounds really great on your larger speakers, or even smaller like Auratones and things like that, and then you go down tiny and you're like, oh my gosh, this, like, it just sounds bad. Like if the vocals aren't bright enough, they'll just get buried, and just there's just all these little different things.
Yeah.
And actually, vocals are a good example, because you hear some vocals that days gone by would sound great. You try playing that now out of your phone, and it sounds like it was this, So,
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting point. I remember there was a period, I can't remember, maybe it was in the 90s or 80s or 90s probably, where they used to bury vocals. They'd put it, they wouldn't be out front. And
right.
I hated that period because you couldn't really, just didn't sound like, for instance, a James Taylor record or something like that, but now I think everyone knows that the vocal it always was the most important thing. So that's probably what you're talking about, is those type of mixes. Again, when you use the null positioning ensemble, that will help. You'll be able to tell whether the vocal is here in front of you, here, 2 feet back. It'll give you depth.
That's a great point. The fact that that's one of the things I remember the most about the Phantom Focus system, but as you get depth, you can hear into your mix. And I'm a big proponent. I mean, I picked, I mix on some Atoms, and I also mix on some Tenoys. And what I like about both those speakers is that you can literally, like, I remember the first time I heard the demo, I just heard into the mix, and there's this depth. And then so I thought I was like doing great. And then I went and heard a system that was calibrated proper, like your Phantom Focus system. And man, it's super wide. Like, you could almost see the reverb tails. It's just that depth is so important.
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. Like you mentioned, 2 monitors. A lot of people will have, 2, 3, 4 monitors, and they're all wrong, because the room is king. Every one of them is wrong, and you can still come up with your own, protocol and your own system. Like, well, okay, well, I'm looking for this on this speaker, and if that sounds right on this speaker, and then I go to this one. You can just invent this whole crazy thing that works. You can make it work. But when you have one system that's accurate, you don't need other ones. The only time having another set of monitors makes sense, and I have a few people who do it. They'll put the speakers. I tell them to put it on the side. Put the speakers on the side. You don't want anything. There's so much we could talk about here. I'm not sure how we're doing time-wise.
We'll be wrapping it up soon.
Okay. You don't want anything in between the speakers. Don't put your video monitor in between the speakers. Get a TV, put it on the wall. You just want that open, completely open. It makes a huge difference. I'm glad you made me think of that. Just keep it open, and ideally you don't want another set of monitors in between there either, because that's the reason. Just put them on the side. So the point is that when you're listening to Phantom Focus, as you know, or not even Phantom Focus, just a null positioning ensemble, the speakers go away. So if you want to hear what speakers sound like, then put them over on the side of the room and then listen to the speakers if you feel like you need to. Because you won't be listening to speakers in the null positioning ensemble.
Wow, that's great advice.
Good point.
I've learned so much in this little time we've had together, Carl. I really appreciate it. Once again, if they want to get a hold of you, where can they get a hold of you?
Just carltatzdesign.com or phantomfocus.com. All the contact. Phantomfocus.com is the e-commerce site that has our own monitors, our subwoofers, consoles, amplifiers, etc. Not our own amplifiers, but we sell some amplifiers there. And you can go to Carl Tatz Design from that website, and vice versa. We've got a new website that's going to come online, I don't know, hopefully in a couple of weeks. But all the information is there on the existing, including all the studios, and you can check that out. Let me know if I can help.
And you know what? I'm going to give a plug for Phantom Focus, since it's really awesome. And the one thing is, we did a roundtable of some Phantom Focus users from studios all across the U.S. And it's actually pretty informative. Yeah. And you can hear it, and it'll be up on your YouTube channel pretty soon, right?
Well, it's not going to be public first, but it will be, it'll go out to our mailing list. So first, there'll be a press release, and that should happen pretty soon. But that's fun, and we kind of talk about a lot of the same things there also. But again, the things we talked about today, I'm just hoping that some people will take advantage of those two things, because it's part of what I call the rhythm section when we do a phantom focus system. Because without that, you're polishing a turd. It's not like you can just take some software and tune the thing and make, disregard where the speakers are and everything. It's a full 2-day installation for us to do it. So, take advantage of those things, because they're super important, the setup.
That's great. And you know what?
Michael.
It takes work. That's what it comes down to. You got to spend the time to do it right, and it takes work, but the rewards are well worth it.
It's easy and it's fun.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Carl. Learned a lot. And for myself, Mike Rodriguez, and Carl Tatz, thanks for listening. And hopefully we'll see you again next year.